Where do we go from here? Recognizing that we have a government-sanctioned monopoly on medical care or even health care, but it's really disease management. And what we have, of course, in the Democratic Party is an abject loss of the love of freedom. There is no conception within the Democratic Party that freedom is better than government and government intrusion into health care. And there's very little trust in that from the Republican side, as we have, of course, the pharmaceutical monopoly. That is welfare Republicans just as sure as welfare is to the individual, welfare to drug companies, and creating a monopoly for them is just as sure evil welfare, because it's stealing from people, stealing from the people to force them to contribute to things that they may not agree with. Charity comes from volunteerism, from a voluntary act. And if you force it, if you steal it from another, you violated one of the principal commandments, and therefore you are a criminal. And, of course, government descends into criminality all the time. That's why we have these United States of America and our Constitution preceded by the Declaration of Independence, so that we would have a limited form of constitutional governance that would not violate anybody's rights, including the right to care for your health the way you believe. But medical mythology dies much harder than the allopathic patients who fall for it, who die very, very easily to the tune of 784,000 Americans a year. And as we wake to realize that much of modern medicine rests on a foundation of biological falsehoods, how much of a leap is it really to understand that much of political reality does too? That is, rest on falsehoods. Now, your body has a constitution. My body has a constitution, much like our nation has a constitution. Now, if you violate it, you ignore it, even if it's done in ignorance, there are consequences. And in biology, the result is disease. In politics, the result is Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, or John Boy McCain. And if you expect that change will come from the same consciousness that created the problem for which you desire change, you wait for something that will never come. I believe in a couple of weeks or less, the number one book on the bestseller list, nonfiction, New York Times, is going to be The Revolution, a Manifesto, coming out. I think it started at number 7. It's up to number 1 in the New York Times bestseller list. Number 1 at Amazon. And if you want to get a political insider's perspective, that's the things they don't realize about Ron Paul. He's a political insider. How could he not be? He's been there for 20 plus years. But that doesn't mean you're corrupt by being on the inside. Based on his behavior, you shall know him. But you want to see and read a political insider's perspective that frightens mainstream Democrats and Republicans alike? Read The Revolution, a Manifesto, because anything that does that has to be good. I mean, if you can tick off and frighten both Republicans and Democrats, you know you're on to something good. And, of course, now we're on to the genetic screening scam, because recently Congress sent a bill, I think H.R. 493, to the Homeland President, George W. Bush, an anti-genetic discrimination bill to sign. Now, it sounds great. Anti-genetic discrimination. We don't want you to discriminate based on genetics. Of course, genetics leads to eugenics, and, of course, it's a whole nightmare scenario of Pandora's box when we get into DNA databasing. But why would the federal government want your DNA in a database? Because there's more to this story than the old media will cover, than they're allowed to cover, than they will cover, and they don't even know to cover it, even if they were allowed to cover it. But I'm going to interpret it for you today so that you don't succumb to a massive infringement upon your genetic integrity. So this bill passed. I have a typo on the blog. If you go there, you'll see it. 434 to 1. I thought everybody was there, but they weren't. It's 414 to 1. It passed 414 to 1. Do you care to guess who opposed it on constitutional grounds? This anti-genetic discrimination bill? Once again, my lovely, humble producer, Don, who might have opposed this bill?
That would be Ron Paul.
How is this the one guy, of course, if he opposes it, you can be pretty sure it's unconstitutional, but that doesn't seem to bother so many people. Political expedience or, well, we don't want to discriminate against your genes, do we? Well, what is the government doing with your genes in the first place? Also, this hour, too, is your bank on the brink of failure? Because we might have an impending economic disaster as to what's going on. So I also want to apply, time permitting, holistic principles, holistic healing principles to monetary issues. And let's see what happens. Why not? Let's do that. And the question to you is, are we a free market or a paper monopoly? And I'll give you the quick answer because there's purple now on the $5 bill. So what do you think? Anybody had the Parker Brothers game when you were a kid? So this House sends the anti-genetic discrimination bill to Bush. Representative Ron Paul, Texas, was the only member of Congress to vote against it. Well, again, we know it's unconstitutional. But what is that federal role in genetic testing or databasing? Because, as you might tell, I'm with Ron Paul here. I know of nowhere in our nation's founding documents that it is a crucial aspect of our government, a proper and lawful role for our government to catalog us like animals. This is what we do to animals. Database them, tag them, clip them, chip them. And now they want to do that to you and me. Of course, it's only a matter of time before these things become mandatory. They start out very nice, the linguistic professionals they hire to write and name and market the bills. I mean, who's going to be against discrimination? You're against discrimination? No, rightful discrimination is good. You have to use your powers of discrimination every day to get through life safely. To survive, even to live, you have to use your powers of discrimination. Discrimination's not all bad. But they want you to believe that this new legislation is necessary to protect you from insurance companies ready to turn you down if they don't like your genetic code. When we come back, I'll explain to you what this bill is really all about, because you're not going to hear about it anywhere else in media. You're listening to the United States of Health Talk Radio. It's the Robert Scott Bell Show.